When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All the Things podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Thomas Chant from Scrimba. So Scrimba is currently running their annual JavaScript Miss, which is a challenge-based event that goes until December 24th of 2024. You can go check that out. There's different prizes, there's swag, there's all kinds of things like that. But we're not just going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the interesting and challenging market conditions that people who are aspiring to be web developers face right now in the job market. We're also going to be talking about Thomas's long-term relationship with being an educator, and does he like educating more? Does he like web development more? Things like that. And then we're also going to touch on AI as well. And we're going to discuss what we think about it. Is it going to replace us? Is it not? What's our stance on it? Should you use AI as a teacher to help you? Should you use AI as a tool? Things like that. We're going to be discussing that as well. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And if you're interested in getting an education, actually learning some coding skills, obviously we're talking about Scrimba, but we have a 10% discount that's valid till the end of 2024 if you use our link, scrimba.com/links/HTML, all the things. That link will be in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And you can get up to 10% off using that link. This offer is only for new accounts. So now let's kind of get into the meat and potatoes of this episode and ask ourselves, who is this Tom guy? What's he doing? No, I'm just bugging you. So Tom is an educator at Scrimba. He's recently published an advanced JavaScript course on the platform, but he is no stranger to the educator or web developer scenes at all, because before Scrimba, he worked as a TEFL teacher for over a decade. And during that time, he also did some commercial and volunteer web development work concurrently with his TEFL teachings. He's familiar with JavaScript, React, WordPress, and more. And of course, he's working on that Node.js course that I believe I mentioned earlier. So without further ado, let's cut to the call with Tom right now. All right, everybody, we have Tom on the line here. And before we jump into this loaded episode, Tom, how's it going? What's up? And what have you been working on?
It's going pretty good, thank you. I'm feeling pretty Christmassy. And at the moment, actually, is pretty cool because I'm working on a Node.js course, and that's what I've been spending most of today on so far.
Excellent. I know that Node.js is something that is kind of a hole in my knowledge. Of course, like I work with a lot of the small to medium businesses. I know the listeners heard this to death. Small to medium businesses at our agency here, and so a lot of them want sort of the pre-configured, kind of built tools, whether it's no code or some WordPress or things like that. And so Node.js is something that I'd love to learn. That's for sure. Because I know I hear about it all the time. And it's just sort of like this big hole in my knowledge. Like, can you do this? I could do all that, but not this.
I really like Node. It's really fun to work with, actually. I've worked quite a bit with WordPress as well, but I'm not really a PHP developer, I have to admit. But Node, I've really got into.
That is one weird thing with WordPress, right? Where I'm not a PHP developer either, and it becomes this weird, like, it's not quite no code, and it's not like it's not technical, like I'm doing like a self-hosted or like a custom hosted solution. So I'm doing a lot of technical stuff, but then again, it's that hole in your knowledge where you get to a point and you're like, well, I'm going to need a plugin for this. And you look it up and it's like, well, I need this one feature, and this plugin is like a suite of like 300 features. And so now I'm paying for this like 300 feature thing, and it just makes like this light blink, like it just becomes, it's like, I'm pretty sure I could have just done this if I do PHP a little bit more, maybe ChatGPT, but who knows? Like,
I was thinking that the other day. Yeah, I need to get ChatGPT into some WordPress plugin or WordPress theme development. I think that might actually be super useful for someone I'm doing a little bit of work for on the side.
So do you think, so just I don't know how much you can tell me about the project, but like theme development is in like you're actually like developing your own theme with ChatGPT, or like just getting certain features online, or?
It's just a little thing that I'm helping some people with. Actually, it's been going on for about a year, and it's a tiny little project, but I just can't really find a theme which suits it. So I've done the best I can. I've got the closest theme, and then I've basically hacked around until it's looking kind of how we want it to look. Still not ideal, and that just kind of made me think, you know what? I could probably make a theme, and yeah, with a bit of help from ChatGPT or a lot of help from ChatGPT, just get it exactly how I want. Because it's kind of frustrating because I'm just thinking, if I was just building this in flat HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I would just get this how I wanted it to look.
Right.
But as soon as you're in the WordPress ecosystem and you're working with other people's themes, and yeah, they're locking down perhaps some features unless you subscribe, which the people don't want to do, et cetera, then you're kind of stuck.
I do find that especially like I'll work a lot with Webflow actually on some clients for some clients, and Webflow is pretty fully featured. Certainly, like any software, it has some things that it doesn't have, right? Just features that haven't been made. That would be super convenient. But I find that to be more the case on WordPress. Like it just seems like I'll pull up, like I do enjoy using Elementor for a lot of clients because they'll sometimes build their own pages if they have someone on the team that's like at least reasonably kind of tech savvy. And so I will try to go toward Elementor, and I do find that Elementor, it'll just be like, oh, I need some conditional visibility. And it's like, oh, like you need another plugin for that. And it's sort of like, this is something that is, so built into Webflow. I never even considered, conditional visibility as being something that I would have to either pay for, or I did find a free one, but or add on just to get conditional visibility. So there is that still in the WordPress ecosystem for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. I haven't actually tried Webflow. That's a complete black hole to me. Maybe it's something I should be directing people towards.
I recommend it if you, so we do it for our website actually. And I'll recommend Webflow for, if you already know HTML and CSS, you really use that knowledge. Like instead of typing in display flex, you literally click the display flex button. Okay. So yeah, so like you can, it's not like WordPress in that when you buy a theme, everything's kind of like a black hole in that theme where you don't know how they built the modules and the visual components. You literally go in there, and if you're like, I don't want this button here, the themes are built in the designer, which is their software, and you can do whatever you effectively want with some limitations, of course, but very little. So it's pretty interesting in that regard.
Nice. Okay. And then that all comes as part of one package, including the hosting, does it? Or you host it yourself?
Yes. So the designer is the software you use to build everything. And then it comes with the hosting and everything as well. And so, there's going to be some limitations there, of course. Like I would say Webflow hosting is more so tailored toward just the site hosting. It's not so much like an all-encompassing, like, hey, I'll store all my files here, or I'll store my podcast on this host. Like, it's not really for that. It's more so for the website. I kind of call Webflow the Apple of website makers. That's kind of what I call it, where it's kind of like a gated community. There are plugins now, like they're starting to add that as of the last year or so. There's sort of official plugins, but it's sort of like everything is all encompassed in your little walled garden.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. If you need any help with it, of course, let me know. And I will absolutely we could chat about it, because I've been using it for a long, long time, and I've been manipulating it to my will. So we've been making it, breaking it, making it do stuff it's not supposed to do. So I'm very, very familiar with it.
People say it's better than Wix, or maybe that's too controversial a statement, but it's different to Wix, perhaps in a way that developers prefer.
I've heard that. I've heard that. I've heard the opposite, because Wix does have like a whole bunch of different options. Like they have like Wix for sort of like, I don't know, I'm just going to call it like for the consumer. And then they have like Wix Studio, which is like more for the developers. So like it's kind of all over the place. Wix is a little bit. They kind of have a lot more options, whereas like Webflow seems to be just sort of like, this is our offering. And, short of you buying different hosting plans with a CMS or without a CMS, or if you go to, I believe it's the enterprise level plan, which is they don't tell you the pricing, you have to negotiate. But if you get up in there, they have like some, I don't want to call it Git, but you can like stage things a little better. There's like private staging and things like that, and like more space and more options for content if you have a lot of content to upload as well.
Okay, it's a whole new world.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But this is not the Webflow podcast, as it may sound like right now. We want to dive into some of Tom's experience and some of what's going on in the industry, and how you can get hired and educating devs and that type of thing. So let's dive in right now. So Tom, your LinkedIn indicates that you were a TEFL, that's teaching English as a foreign language for the listener out there, teacher for over 18 years, and that you somewhat concurrently did some volunteer or pro bono, as well as commercial freelance web developer work for about 10 years as well. And you did all that before you started as an educator at Scrimba, which was in December of 2021. So I'm just want to ask, why not transition fully into web development earlier in your career?
Do you know that? Do you know what? That is something actually which I regret. I regret waiting so long. Teaching English as a foreign language is a really fun job, and I did it because I enjoyed it, which of course is is perfect to have a job you enjoy. But I did stay in it too long, for sure, and I do actually regret not taking the plunge earlier. And I think there are probably all sorts of reasons why not. Probably imposter syndrome being one of them, right? Because and it's one of the questions we get asked at Scrimba all of the time, which is, when am I ready? When am I ready? And I started messing around with websites and HTML at least in about 2004. So yeah, I didn't take it very seriously at first, and I certainly didn't get stuck into any JavaScript at first. But as time went on and as we got into the sort of mid 2010s, etc., I had been playing around with stuff a lot, and that was when I started to get my first commercial work, as you say, also a bit of sort of charity work as well. So really, probably the reason I didn't take that leap sooner was simply a matter of self-confidence and self-belief. And my strongest advice to people is, when you think you're ready, or even when you don't think you're ready, start going for it and just, see what you get, because you'll find out. And if you're not ready, you take a little bit longer. It doesn't matter.
There is like so much in the web development world, especially in that era you were talking around, like 2010, where it kind of feels like, I mean, I don't have dates like in my head, but it just that feels like the era where, web apps are really starting to get really popular. People are starting to question, like, is everything going to be a web app? Is it going to become, what are these mobile apps? Like, where are they going to sit? Are they going to become, web apps? Like, that wasn't necessarily the primary conversation, but it's what it started. And so there's so much during that era. And I'm sure like you can attest or even comment on that, where, it'd be so easy to get stuck in imposter syndrome. Because I actually fixed a website just a few years ago for some people, or more or less renovated it. And it was done by a family friend of theirs. And that guy had been in web development for, I think it was like 10 years or something like that at that point. So he was there really in the pioneering age. And he got to about 2010 or so, and he just was like, man, like, I'm out of here. Like, he was just done. Like, it was a side gig for him. And he just said, like, it's just now too much.
Yeah, it certainly, I think it's kind of always felt like it's continually evolving, but at a ridiculous rate almost. And I guess I had pretty much got my head around jQuery when suddenly jQuery just wasn't a thing anymore, for example. Yeah. And then everyone's like, okay, it's all about React, which thankfully has persisted for quite some time now and is still relevant and is still useful. But yeah, no, I think things moved a lot. Exactly where we're going to go down the road of progressive web apps, what back-end technology were you going to use, if any? Just the questions were kind of endless. And no, it certainly felt overwhelming. And there was a time where when I decided to take JavaScript really seriously. And probably a couple of months into that process, I had quite a big crisis of confidence where I thought, I should have gone down the Python route. Everyone says Python's easier. Everyone says, Python's got great job opportunities. You can do all of this kind of data analysis stuff with it. And it's just like JavaScript is or the whole sort of web dev world feels kind of overwhelming and never ending. And anytime anyone talks about something like a roadmap or something like that, it's pretty much, a lifetime's worth of learning or more.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I can totally feel that.
What's interesting is, like, I'm sure that other industries experience this to an extent as well. Like, I'm sure, for example, like game development has, like for video games, or has like rapidly changed in recent years, right? Because we start seeing, I don't know if you're a gamer, but you start seeing like indie games, kind of take off in their graphic fidelity and things like that. So clearly or at least I would think, I'm not a game dev, so maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it looks like the tooling is getting, better and better. And that sort of seems to be the case with web development. But I mean, I kind of have that hesitation even myself, where like I'll work with Webflow, work with WordPress, things like that. But what's weird is that, like, I'll be scared to jump into like a coding tool. Like, I'll be like, oh, like, is Node going to stick around? Like, the same thing you were saying. Is Python still going to be relevant? I know I had a buddy who was learning Python out of college because we had not learned it in college, and he was all about it. And then he just never ended up getting into that kind of career path. And I was just sort of like, I don't know if I want to jump into this stuff. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's a bit of that imposter syndrome, but it's also a bit of that, like, how relevant is this going to be? How much do you think that, like, people should consider that? I know that people try to future proof into the future forever, thinking that we're going to live forever. It sometimes feels like, man, this is only future proof for the next 20 years. Like, what are we going to do, kind of thing. What do you think on that? Like, if you're going to jump in, like if someone's listening right now and they're in that, I guess, analysis paralysis almost of trying to choose a language or trying to choose like a field within tech or within web development, even, how much of that do they need to worry about?
I don't think they need to worry that much, actually, because I think it's partly about learning concepts rather than specific languages or specific syntax or specific technologies. I think once you get proficient in whatever language, you've got a load of transferable skills if it comes time to change. But yeah, you'll perhaps just have to keep an eye on things and maybe, I suppose, just not get too comfortable in a job to the extent that you haven't just got one eye over your shoulder just to check what's going on, and find that, like, you're in the one company that, yeah, like the jQuery example, like, I don't know, maybe you get made redundant after 10 years of using jQuery and suddenly you're in this world you don't understand, and that's going to be pretty depressing. So yeah, I think it's more just about awareness and making sure you get the concepts, because I think if you've got one framework, you can get another pretty easily. And if you've got one language, definitely, I think, very much like with human languages, I think that language part of your brain actually strengthens. It becomes faster. It becomes more attuned to what coding is all about. And things in other languages, even when you don't know them, just sort of make more sense. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. I think it's just about being aware of it. And trying not to worry about it. And probably, I think in sort of cycle racing, like the Tour de France or something, when they're going up a massive hill, the cyclist will tend to look down at their wheel rather than look at how much of the hill they've got left in front of them. And I think it's a really great idea to look at roadmaps and to sort of plan out your learning and plan out what you need for the next step of your career. But it's also important to maybe just remember, where you are at the moment and what you can do at the moment, and how cool that is, because else it can just get a bit unnecessarily stressful and overwhelming. And of course, everyone's in the same boat. It's just that symptom of imposter syndrome, whereby you're also thinking that it's really only you in that boat. But in fact, it is pretty much everyone, unless they're super lucky.
Yeah, super lucky, or what do they call those 10x engineers or whatever, where they're just like, yeah, I got it. Like, don't you worry. Like, it's like, oh, okay, thank you. Well, between your teachings, so your TEFL teachings, and your job at Scrimba, I noticed that the constant is that you're an educator. Like, you're even educating me, and we're discussing this stuff. So I just kind of wanted to know, like, are you passionate specifically about teaching, and specifically teaching other people new skills? And if so, does this take precedence over web development? Like, are you more of like a passionate educator more than like a passionate web developer educator? Or would you teach any topic at all?
So what happened was when I was teaching, the plan that I was kind of hatching at the back of my head was that what we saw going through the sort of 2010s was that a lot of the English language teaching publishers were sort of starting to think, okay, they need to move into the new age. And they were starting to think about putting content online. And they were doing it incredibly badly. It was all absolutely awful stuff. And they were basically repeating the sort of terrible textbook experience, but in a website or perhaps on a CD-ROM that you load up or whatever. And what I was thinking long term was that I'm going to end up staying in the English teaching industry, but as a developer. I will be kind of like the bridge, like the sort of the developer that actually knows what the client really needs, as opposed to just kind of, sticking to the safe, old, boring path. That was something that I sort of focused on more and more and did more and more research into it, but never actually found anybody that was looking to hire in that sphere at all. And when the job came up at Scrimba, at first I didn't think that they would be likely to give me that job. And then when they advertised again a few weeks later and said they hadn't actually managed to fill the space, I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for this. And as I had done some Scrimba courses at that point, because I'd taken a decision to go to Scrimba to do some React. And when I did the React course, I then decided, you know what, I like this. I'm going to actually go right back to the beginning. And I'm going to start as a complete beginner. And anything I know, I'm just going to fast forward through it because I know I've got holes. I'm looking at my code and I'm thinking, there's some stuff I always do, which I'm sure is not best practice. And so I just thought I'll start right from the beginning. And having done a bunch of Scrimba courses, and I did start to think, you know what, I think maybe I could do this job. And that's when I ended up applying for that. And it was actually quite a surprise that I went in that direction. So short answer to your question, I did kind of think that I would stay in the education field, but I did definitely want to move into a coding role, because the other thing that I'd really found was if there was anything that had to be done after school, it would be a massive trauma for me. It would be a massive, I'm talking about things to do with English teaching. If I had to read a book, if I had to create create a test for my students or mark an exam or something like that, it was like, I just want to get this out of the way as soon as possible. Whereas whether I was building something for somebody or just doing some studying JavaScript, studying React, the time just disappeared. Suddenly it would be 2:00 in the morning and I would still be in front of my PC. And that was something I was just never going to do in the old job. It was a fun job in many ways, but it wasn't a passion. So I absolutely, definitely needed to move into code. It just didn't quite happen in the way I expected it to, but it worked out well.
There's something I wanted to kind of pull on in there that you mentioned, and that was that, sort of the way that they were teaching English, like through CD-ROMs and that type of thing, was sort of like kind of like an old dusty way in a way. And there's a lot of these sort of coding, not necessarily coding schools, like Scrimba I would say is kind of a coding school, coding platform. There's also random courses that people will make on YouTube, right? Just a collection, a playlist of videos, or there's Udemy courses, things like that. What is your kind of take on that? Like, specifically, I know that like some traditional schools, like colleges and universities, and there's so many, so not all of them are going to be bad, but some of them get criticized, right? And it's like, hey, I went to school for, X topic. I didn't really learn that. I had to go to Udemy. I had to go to YouTube. I had to go on the job to really learn it. What's your kind of thoughts on that? Because like that made me think immediately, like, there is some of that sort of dusty teaching in traditional institutions. And just to sort of give a personal story really brief is like in Canada, we learn like English and French, obviously. So I'm in an English speaking province. So that's just the language we use here. But then we have to learn French up to a minimum of grade 9, which is first year's high school. And I think you get like 4 years total of it. And what the literal teachers, or like I think maybe even a supply teacher, a temporary teacher may have said to us once, they're like, we're not teaching you guys the right way. Like the way we're teaching you is like long form. Like if you stick with this for, however many years, you'll be super fluent in French. They're like, the problem is we're only teaching you from grade like 6 through 9 or whatever it is, like 4 years. And so you're going to forget all this. And like, sure enough, like I can kind of read the odd word and I can kind of like stumble my way around if I go to Quebec. But like, it's not that way. And so like that gave me that impression right away. I'm like, this is a bit dusty. You know, this is like a bit like, okay, if this is the wrong way, like why are we doing it like this?
I totally agree. I think traditional education is stuck in a pretty terrible rut. And yeah, I think there's a lack of a kind of lack of asking the question of how do I make this relevant? How do I make it interesting? How do I make it stick? How do I make it practical? How do I make the student want to use it? Because ultimately, learning is basically repetition until that neural pathway or whatever it is kind of fixed in place fairly strongly. But yeah, to get to that point, if it's not relevant, if it's not interesting, those neural pathways are just much harder to create. So yeah, I think traditional teaching is horribly stuck in a rut. I think you see it certainly in the UK, in schools, in universities. I think things have changed. I don't think they've necessarily changed that much at university, surprisingly. I think they're still stuck in the idea of everybody turns up to a lecture at 9 o'clock in the morning, it lasts 90 minutes, and then at the end of the semester they get some exams or something. And it doesn't really need to be like that. And it is interesting to see people who are now actually kind of foregoing the idea of a college education and replacing it with, whether it's kind of self-taught or just choosing their education provider and not really working towards a recognized certificate of any description, but just getting the skills that they need. At the end of the day, I mean, in most countries, I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the UK, university education is now pretty seriously expensive. Perhaps not as bad as it is in the States, I believe, but it is pretty expensive. And other stuff is much cheaper and perhaps much more to the point. Scrimba, being a prime example of that. I mean, obviously I'm kind of biased, but it's a fraction of the cost. And if specifically what you want to learn is web development, then why not specifically study web development and do it in a way which is practical and which is efficient and which involves practice and actual learning, rather than doing a whole bunch of other stuff at the same time, which you may well never need, never use, not be interested in, and have it cost you a fortune.
Because there is something there too. Is I noticed that. So like I went just to college. So we have like college and university, and I went to college because I wanted the hands-on. And like to kind of touch on something you were saying is a lot of the skills that I picked up were actually because our college, it was a technical diploma and it had a work component. So I worked in the field for a year and 4 months, minimum of 8 months, but I did the full tenure of a year and 4 months. And I noticed that, a lot of the like connections that you make, like it'll be like, oh, you could work here, you could work there. Like people are like kind of telling you stuff and you're like, I thought that company was university only, and like you learn very quickly that some companies are definitely very stickler about what like piece of paper you have, what diploma, what, you have to be from an institution of this standard or, something. But many don't care. Many, it's like, just show us what you got. And 2 people from our course actually got hired at Google, and everyone was like, whoa, like this is like because it was what they ended up doing was we found out they had a blog, each of them. And they were just building weird things. Like they were just like, ooh, I bought like a touchpad. Let's like make it change my Christmas lights or, things like that. And so Google like saw the blog and was like, yeah, cool. Like finish your education. Sure. Like, they let them do that. But they're like, when can we have you kind of thing? And it made me think like, okay, like this is a kind of a brave new world in that way.
I love that story. I just think it's so cool the way that things are being turned on their head. And I mean, we hear stories or we speak to students from all over the place, and it does still seem in some places a college degree in computer science or similar is preferred. But in a lot of other places, it really doesn't seem to matter at all. And also, obviously, plenty of companies that might even just cut that bit out of the CV and not show it to whoever's doing the hiring and purely focus on the skills. And I'm a big fan of that, actually. I think it's a good leveler. I mean, yeah, we don't need to get like sort of too controversial about the politics, but I do feel like some people who have had a very privileged and a very expensive education are perhaps not as capable as the pieces of paper they have on their wall would suggest that they are. And maybe you do see that reflected in some things that happen.
I'm not going to name names, but we've certainly had the odd professor where it's like, do you know what's going on in here? Because like, I'm learning it and I kind of feel like I might know a little more right now. Like maybe that's a bit of a know-it-all young guy mentality, but it's just sort of like, I wasn't the only one that thought that. So in the class. So definitely one of those jobs is sort of like, where did you go to school, sir? You know. But, kind of based on this conversation, I've seen many people suggest that aspiring web developers, so people that are in it, right? They're learning, whether they're learning at a traditional institution or they're self-learning, learning on Scrimba, whatever. I've seen people suggest that they should be sharing their journey and more specifically sharing their knowledge on social media. So as they learn it, they try to build up some social media following by saying like, okay, today I learned about HTML. I'll make up, like a post for X or on Facebook or wherever, whatever their social media of choice is. And this will kind of help them gather a following, maybe gather even some connections. So as an educator and web developer, what are your thoughts on this? Like, can newbies really help educate their colleagues? Is this more of a marketing thing for them as they're kind of growing in their web development journey?
I think it's actually all of that. I mean, I'm a massive fan of learning in public. From an education point of view, I think teaching something is an amazing way to learn it. Maybe it didn't work for your old professor, but it does work, I think, for a lot of people. I mean, it worked for me right back in the beginning. It worked for me with the English language and the grammar system that we have, which is pretty crazy. That is something that I kind of learned on the job, really. I mean, the course that you do in it is pretty superficial. And I think with code, it is the same. If you break something down to the extent that you're going to explain it to somebody who doesn't understand it, you're doing yourself a huge favor. Yeah, there is a bit of a question about how much are you helping other people. And I do think that, when you Google anything in web dev, you're almost bound to come across a Dev2 article or something like that. And sometimes you look at it and you think, I kind of know the kind of person who wrote this. They're really keen, they're really enthusiastic, and they're a complete beginner. And so, you might have to cross-check a few things that you read from time to time. But by and large, I actually don't think it's a problem. I don't think you read too much stuff which is actually wrong. I think you see different perspectives on it, different ways of explaining it, different metaphors that might work for you in different ways. And I think that's fine. Occasionally, yeah, you come across the odd thing. You think, that's a bit of a simplification or a bit tenuous or whatever. But mostly, I really don't think it's a problem. And I think people can and should learn. I mean, I think peer-to-peer learning is actually really important, whatever it is you're learning. I think you can pick up a lot from somebody who just has a little bit more knowledge than you in one area. And perhaps you would even go so far as to say it's better to learn from somebody who's not too far ahead of you, because if you speak to somebody who's, 20 years in the industry and they've been there, done that, know it all, they're quite often not that great at explaining something right at the sort of simple end, right at the beginning end. They quite often can't really do it without getting into, I don't know, talking perhaps about callback functions or something like that, which quite a lot of beginners don't really have a handle of what that is. It's just another one of those annoying long words that they're going to have to figure out one day. And so I think that sort of peer-to-peer thing is really important and really beneficial. And I think, yeah, perhaps one of the other great things you can do along similar lines is just get a coding buddy and just chat about it, literally. But I think, and it's not for everybody, but I think, yeah, if you can put it down in writing and put it in a blog post, I think if you can put it on a YouTube channel, do live coding on Twitch, whatever it is you fancy, whichever one works for you, really. I think it will pay dividends for you. And I think, yeah, probably for other people as well.
It reminds me of sort of something that one of my science teachers told me, which was like, sometimes you just need someone else to explain it to you. Like someone else is explaining it, and it's so clear to them, and they've simplified, a concept down to whatever it is in their mind. But somebody else might use an analogy, or they might just explain it just a little different, and you'll get it immediately. Right. Yeah. So sometimes it's not that you aren't smart enough, or you just like are struggling with this particular topic. Oh, that happens. But sometimes it's more like, hey, like just explain it in just a little bit of a different way. and it'll just turn a light on in your head kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And definitely, and I think also sometimes you just need to study something multiple times, but you probably don't want to watch the same tutorial 3 times, 4 times. You don't want to read the same article several times. You just want to hear it in a slightly different form. And as you say, maybe something in there will just click.
And it's great these days too, because we have so many different forms now. It's like you could, quickly grab almost like a cheat sheet on like a short video platform, like a TikTok or like YouTube Shorts, etc., Reels. Just like a quick hey, I already kind of read or watched the long form bit of content on callbacks, like you mentioned. But I just can't remember something, quickly find a cheat sheet online, whether that's a short video or something. And then you're not going, like you're saying, not going through that slog of an hour and a half or whatever, the course was. You don't have to go through that again. You just want a refresher. And that might come from the form of someone who just went through it and ended up, throwing it up on X on a video or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, with this, kind of talk about sort of, I guess we'll call them third-party educators, I suppose. AI it seems to be one of these now. So AI is everywhere, web development's no exception. AI has fully infiltrated that. I use it. I know that Mike uses it, my co-host as well. And I've heard that you use it as well a lot, Tom. And we just saw the I don't know if I shouldn't say most anticipated. We just saw a very anticipated or maybe feared release of OpenAI's Sora video generator. And we're only a few years ultimately into this AI thing. AI's kind of really hit the mainstream in the last few years, and we're, generating videos that don't look like that original Will Smith eating spaghetti it's video. So, with that being said, AI kind of seems to be an accoutrement now. It's almost like a mentor now. So what is your overall stance on AI? Do you use it? If yes, how so? And, personally, professionally, or both?
I do use it quite a bit professionally. I use it probably in in a couple of quite specific ways. I use it as a bit of a time saver. And the only time when I really just use it to generate code from scratch is, for example, so we've been running JavaScriptmas at Scrimba. So that's a coding challenge every day for 24 days, needed to come up with 24 ideas. Spent quite a long time throwing ideas around. And rather than code each of them up individually to start figuring out if it's actually going to work as a challenge, so much quicker just to sort of say to ChatGPT, look, just give me this code right now. It doesn't really matter what quality that code is because you're just kind of looking at the concept and just deciding what you're going to do with it. So for things like that, it's perfect. Other things, for quite a lot of the apps that we make in our courses, we want to have some data. And yeah, there are options online, some lorem ipsum API or something. But if you want to make the project something a little bit special and you want something themed, you might want to have, 20 objects in an array, and each object has got travel facts, weird and wonderful facts for 20 countries around the world or something like that. And you can just obviously bring up that data super quick. So there are things in there which are really, really useful, really great time savers. I suppose the big questions about AI are, is it any good as a code generator? And if so, will it cost us our jobs? And I think that there is something going on with AI which is obviously pretty impressive. And, there's money to be made, right? And people are looking to raise money, and people are coming up with these demonstrations where they, for example, show some model a picture of an app, and then that model will churn out all the code they need for that app. I think most of us have seen demonstrations like that. That's quite interesting, because the apps that they're building with basically no code needed on the behalf of the actual person who wants the app, there's two things about them. They tend to be something pretty simplistic, like some kind of currency converter, or they tend to be something like the Nokia Snake game or Breakout or Pac-Man. You know what? They can obviously code up those games a heck of a lot faster than I can if they're using ChatGPT by orders of magnitude. But what we don't recognize is that also I can go to a million places on the internet and find all of that code already made by somebody. There's a million GitHub repos where that code lives that you can just take. So what's being demonstrated there is actually not that impressive. It is impressive, but it's not as impressive as it's being promoted as. When you actually use, and I've tried this with various providers, ChatGPT and others, to when you try and produce something which is unique, and I tried this just recently during JavaScriptmas. I wanted to make a little maze game with Santa being chased by the Grinch. It was kind of Pac-Man-ish, but it was different. The models actually struggled. They gave me just asking them to create the whole project. So wanting the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I got quite a lot of buggy code. I got a lot of problems, and I got stuff that I wouldn't be able to sort out if I didn't know JavaScript. And I think the elephant in the room here is actually that AI is pretty good at small tasks. It's pretty good at simplistic tasks. It absolutely is not good at doing things which are unique, which have quite sort of specific aims and goals. And that's why I don't actually feel too worried about developer jobs disappearing to AI. I think it's only really useful as a coding tool in the hands of a coder. Now, I do think it makes coders work faster, so maybe teams can be smaller, or maybe teams will just produce more code. Who knows? I think it does open up some interesting opportunities. I think, for example, say a small business might ideally want to have an app which is tailored very specifically to its needs. But if it actually paid a developer traditionally to create that app, it's going to cost a small fortune. And it's only perhaps a small business. They just don't have that kind of money. Whereas now, a decent developer using AI to speed things up can actually make that product a lot cheaper. And that just means you've got more potential customers. So there's actually perhaps options for growth there as well in the industry, which are quite promising. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic. And I think it is a tough job market at the moment in most parts of the world, but I don't think that's really much to do with AI at all. I think that's pure economics. And so, yeah, I don't know. I do think I have some reservations about AI. I think there are some drawbacks and problems with it, namely the amount of energy it uses, and perhaps is one area which really does need to be kind of what's the word? I just needs to be made as green as possible, basically, I guess, just having these data centers kind of crunching that much hard stuff is just perhaps too energy intensive at the moment. Hopefully that can change. And I do think of that, when I go to ChatGPT for something casual, I do think to myself, do you know what? You should just Google this and not actually have AI do some heavy lifting for you, because it's just a bit wasteful. And I think obviously the other big problem is with where the information comes from and who created the images, which DALL-E is providing you with, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess that's going to end up in court at some point soon and maybe get ironed out or maybe rumble on for years.
Yeah, because one thing I do hear a lot of is like sort of that conversation, like that back and forth of like, will AI replace us as developers? Will it not? And like, it's weird. Like, to me, I always think like maybe in 10 years, like that's my thought, is like maybe in 10 years, because it's advancing so quickly. However, as something that you mentioned, I read a thread maybe a couple weeks ago, and they made an interesting observation that, we're progressing slowly, like, humans progressing slowly in relation to like the everyday media or something like that. In other words, like there's a lot of reference material for everything that we have as developers so far in the lifespan of AI. So just to kind of clarify what I'm saying is that there's not like, it's not like Node has just come out. Like Node's been out, React has been out, WordPress has been out. So we can ask ChatGPT all these questions, and there's a lot of reference material, whether it's the official docs or there's like these influencers that are writing things, or people that are just writing sort of, different things on X and whatever. There's all these guides and ways to like interact with React. But if Node was brand new, if Node was a brand new invention, of which I don't know if there has been a brand new invention since AI has come out, not that I could think of, and we asked it that edge case of like, hey, can you make this app like you were doing with your Grinch app? can you do this? It would probably give you a very simplistic, like, just from the documentation, because how else would anyone have learned that, right? Like, it's artificial intelligence, so it's only going to realistically, as far as I understand it, learn from the documentation, and it's just going to give you like a very like, yeah, like the docs say to do this, and hopefully that helps. Like, I feel like that's what it's going to give you, right? Like, it's not going to give you like, oh yeah, I could replace this image with the Grinch or whatever. Like, it's not going to know that. It's not going to understand that.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. It's going to make some probably quite bland kind of coding comments that it's garnered from elsewhere or something, but not, yeah, not be super helpful if you're a non-coder, maybe not be that helpful at all. I actually experienced that. I mean, I think it was a bit less than a year ago. I made a course on LangChain JS. I don't know if you've ever used LangChain, but it's an AI framework basically. Really great, really interesting. It speeds up things like retrieval augmented generation, these RAG chatbots, so you can give something a bunch of your own data, like a PhD thesis or something like that, and create a chatbot that's going to answer questions, if possible, from the information you've given it specifically. And LangChain is great. And it is quite a steep learning curve, though, or at least at the beginning it was, because they've now actually refactored it and the syntax is much clearer. But in the early days, it was pretty complex stuff, and I was struggling with it. And I was speaking to ChatGPT about it and getting nowhere because it's new, very little documentation. And yeah, that then you kind of feel like, well, you can't be in this world where you rely on AI, because when it's not there for you, you're just sitting there yeah. on your own, and it's lonely.
Yeah, because it itself does not have motivation. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going in to, you know, the documentation, like in that, you know, fake scenario that Node was brand new. It's not going into the docs and being like, I'll try to make all these apps and see if they work. Oh, they're not working. Why is that? Right? Like, that's like a human motivation to do that. And then a human motivation to then say, I'll publish this on my blog, or I'll start a blog about this. Whereas like ChatGPT is just sort of like, well, I'll refer to new stuff, but I'm not going to be the one that writes the new stuff, which is interesting. Like, it's going to be an interesting 10 years, I think, honestly, like one of the more fascinating things, especially in the courts, like you had mentioned as well, where, you know, what's going to happen with the image generation, because there's the argument of like, hey, that guy's stealing my art. But at the same time, it's like, but if I wanted to do art, or if anyone wanted to do art, you look around for inspiration. And so then there's that conversation of like, well, how far can inspiration go before it's infringement? Like, who knows? Like, the lawyers and whoever else will figure all that out. Like, that's beyond my legal whatever tenure or whatever. And it's a big moral question too. It starts becoming like, well, can a human do it but not a machine? Like, I don't know.
it is a crazy thing, because in the music industry, actually, it's super strict, right? People who have just had sort of combinations of notes pop up in their song have ended up being sued by someone from the 1970s who said, actually, I used that combination before you. But then I believe I'm right in saying in fiction, it's much more relaxed, and you can pretty much, you know, write a series of books about a boy wizard whose parents were killed when they were 7 or something. Yeah. You don't use the word Harry Potter, you're pretty much fine. So yeah, who knows what the court's going to come up with. But yeah, I totally see that AI defense of that the AI is just doing what you would do. Every spaceship you've ever drawn comes from the sci-fi movies you've seen and the comics you've read. You know, it's not something you were born with. So it's acting like a human. But yeah, is that a good defense? We will see in the future. But I think another interesting point is, where are we in the life cycle of the concept of an LLM? Because part of me thinks it kind of exploded, about 2 years ago now, or less. Time has gone too quickly. And suddenly we were in this whole new world of actual AI, which was good. But then now, are we just kind of like tweaking the same thing, making it tiny little bit better here, tiny little bit better there, but not actually taking any giant leaps? And that does make me question, like, will there be another giant leap in the idea of sort of LLM, of predictive AI, or will the next giant leap actually be something different, which is probably further away? And, you know, maybe it's the former, and LLMs will just keep getting slightly better bit by bit over the next 10 years, and they'll become a part of life, but we're still some way off from some kind of breakthrough that sort of truly passes the Turing test and really is kind of general AI but when and how, who knows?
I did see, and just the headline. I didn't read the article, but I did see a headline where the Sundar, the CEO of Google, had made a comment, something like AI development is finally slowing because the low hanging fruit has been kind of attained at this point. And honestly, like personally, like it's a good question. Like what you're saying, it's a good question of like, have we maxed out where we're at? Because what we had before is I was like very, very closely following Google Assistant back in the day, where Google Assistant was getting better and better. Like we went from like those. We used to have, I forget what I think it was called Nuance or something like that. It was like a voice activation system on our phones, and it would like, please wait, say a command. And it was very specific, and it would always mishear you. And it was like a thing on smartphones and some basic other phones. And like Google Assistant was such a big jump that like my assumption and a bunch of the assumption of people online was, oh, Google Assistant's just going to keep getting better and better and better. They had that technology where it would call people for you. Like you'd be like, yo, make me an appointment to get my hair cut. And it would make that appointment for you. They had that demo. I don't know if you remember that. And so the assumption was Google Assistant's going to be the one. And now like Google Assistant's just sort of like, yeah, okay, go away. We have this new Gemini thing. And it's been like, tons of years have gone by where you hear so little about Google Assistant. And, I use my Google Assistant, sure, but I used to use it for searching, and I rarely do now. I'll use like ChatGPT or something, or just Google. But I'll end up just using my assistant just to turn on the lights, and it's like that thing that I thought was going to be the next Terminator became just like, yo, turn my light on, kind of thing. And it's like, what's this Gemini thing doing over here, right? What's this ChatGPT thing doing? So it is a good question, is to like how much we've like how far can we stretch this LLM before it's like, no, it's not that. It's like ALM, advanced language model or something, something like that. Yeah. So it's a good question.
Yeah. And I do feel I kind of get bugged a little bit by some of the hype around it when people are launching things. I kind of wish that would die down a little bit now, and we could just be a little bit more realistic about what things can do. I feel like I've seen too many demos which I couldn't really replicate just by changing them slightly. And yeah, that will hopefully I don't know, maybe it just never ends. The hype around tech is never ending. Perhaps that's just the way it is.
I've never seen anything take off as fast as AI, though. Like the fact that every computer is like, we have AI microphones and an AI processor. I was like, I'm on a computer from last year which did not have an AI processor, and I'm using AI, and it's instant, or as instant as I think it can be. So it's like, I don't know how quick we want this to be, like, but I think ultimately what they do need to figure out, and hopefully now that things have simmered, if that's true, is the UX, because I still feel the UX is really weird. Like, I don't know about you, but they released that ChatGPT search engine, and if you ask it a prompt without that toggle on, it will sometimes decide to search. And I think to myself, I'm like, I find that to be a bit of a weird UX where it's deciding to search sometimes, and then I can like force it to search, but then like I'm the one making the decision. Like I just feel as though it's like, okay, like why would anybody toggle that on if it's the one going to be deciding it sometimes? Like I just always feel that's weird. Or even the fact, and like feel free to chime in, but even the fact that we're in like separate chats all the time. So it'll be like I go to like ask it a question, and it'll be like crazy questions like all throughout the day. It'll be like, how do I configure like this website this certain way? And then it's like, how long does it take for avocados to go bad? Like it's completely like irrelevant to each other, but it's in this one chat, and it labeled it as like how to fix a website. And I'm like, where was that avocado advice? It's in my text. It's in one of my tech chats. It's just like, to me, I just think it's like some of that UX stuff has gone by the wayside.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I guess they need to do something around the context of the conversations, right? They in the background actually to be separating them out for you. So it should be able to tell what is part of your website chat and what is part of your avocado chat, and in the background, it should be able to separate those out and basically, have the ability to re-find those facts for you much better than it does. But basically, at the moment, when you're trying to search through, it does have that search function, but it's actually not particularly useful. And when you're thinking, I know last week it told me something about Node.js that I really want to know right now, and I can't find it. And yeah, no, I totally agree. I think there's quite a lot to do there, um, which could be improved for sure.
What do you think about AI in terms of in terms of the educator experience? Like, do you kind of bring it back to that a little bit? Like, because you were saying maybe it told you something about Node last week that you really wanted to know, and so from somebody who's listening to this right now, and they're sort of maybe they use AI for their avocado personal chats or whatever, like they're cooking or whatever it is that they do in their personal life, and they'd like to become like a coder, right? Like a developer. Like, how much AI should they use? Some people are scared of it, where it's like, hey, it's going to generate bad code. Other people are like, no, use it as a mentor. I'm kind of on that side where I'm like, it's not going to replace a human mentor, but it is a mentor that is there in the middle of the night if you had a question. And you don't have to wait for your mentor to answer next day or something.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, I do think one thing it does definitely do pretty consistently well is to explain code. And, when I'm recording a course, I don't really want to put something in that course which I didn't know and which I only have from AI, from ChatGPT. That doesn't seem ethically right thing to do. I would always want to cross-check that. But that said, pretty much all the time when you ask it to explain, something line by line or sort of chunk by chunk, nothing too huge, it pretty much has it. And that can be really, really useful. And I think that's one of the probably best uses of it when you're learning. Obviously, the worst use of it is just to generate code you don't understand. And that's obviously a big no-no. But I think speaking to it about code can be really, really useful. And I think that is something which is super frustrating actually without AI, which is when you're trying to find out, I don't know, for example, in Node.js, if you're working with common JS modules in the old style, you have access to file name. It's a global object. You can just access it anywhere. But if you're working with ES modules, actually that global object does not exist. You have to create it yourself. And I was like, why is that? That seems weird that you'd actually improve the language, but take away something that's pretty useful. And pretty hard actually when you Google that, you find loads of explanations, but all of the explanations are about the workaround, not about the actual reason for the problem. And sometimes traditional search engines just get stuck in that. They'll serve you 200, 300 search results pages of pretty much the same fact. And it's just not quite what you want. And come across that a lot in code. And AI is just fantastic for actually giving you an answer. And yeah, you may have to verify that answer. I guess sometimes I do feel like AI aims to please. It likes to say yes. It likes to give you something. I don't think it hallucinates anything like as badly as it used to, but still potentially it does. But no, I think it's hugely useful for that. And I think it's useful. There's a few things I found it really useful for actually. In larger projects, maybe you've been messing around with all sorts of different styles, really easy to end up with a load of CSS that you don't actually need. Quite a pain to actually go through it and try and figure out what you don't need. The AI can do that super quickly and super efficiently. That's nice. Helping with accessibility is very good in HTML. It's very, very good at finding where you should be using, ARIA Live and things like that. Maybe things which too many of us are too rusty on, if we're honest, because it's quite a big topic, obviously, making a website accessible. And AI has some strong knowledge on that, and it's worth just having it go over your code and assessing it for accessibility. And a lot of good uses like that. I think basically, as long as it's not just generating the code for you, as long as you're interacting with it, asking it questions, asking it for explanations, asking it to check things, it's really, really useful. And of course, a human mentor is not infallible either. They also make mistakes. They also miss things.
Of course, because they may have been taught not necessarily incorrect, but inefficient even sometimes way to do something. Right. Yeah. And it's like, oh, no, there's a new CSS, selector or something that can do that now. We don't need to be pulling in JavaScript. And they may not know. Right. There's so much there's so much knowledge out there. And accessibility is a great touch on because it's absolutely something where you'll just forget an ARIA label or you'll forget, something where it's hey, maybe we shouldn't be using div for everything. Maybe we should be putting this in a footer or nav or actually have our skeleton have labeled bones instead of just being bone. another bone, another bone, things like that. So, so with that, like, is there anything specific? Because, like, our AI conversation has been quite positive. Is there anything that you're against in AI? Like, is there anything that you're like, like, I don't know, like, I know the DALL-E stuff is sort of like a question. Is there anything that you're against? And is there anything you're looking forward to in the future specifically?
I don't think there's anything that I'm against in the sort of general day-to-day use of it. As I say, apart from the energy consumption, and of course the ability for people to churn out fake news and deep fakes, etc., which is of course worrying. But I think in its kind of as intended use, there's nothing there too much that I worry about, other than that I think we will probably increasingly see people who disagree with the idea that it's not going to replace the job of a developer and are therefore producing some pretty shoddy apps and websites. And I fear we're going to see quite a lot of bad code out there just for the fact that it's kind of quick and lazy and perhaps easy for people to produce this stuff. I mean, I know that there's been a bit of a problem on Amazon with self-publishing. People have been churning out AI-generated romance novels, and they're pretty much trash. But worse than that, they're kind of incomprehensible trash, really. But still, they're kind of out there. They're polluting the space, and they don't need to be. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest danger, is just the kind of not exactly fraudulent use of it, but just the kind of intellectually dishonest use of it is the worry. But I mean, in a way, we've been through this historically when the printing press was invented, when the idea of making media go to a wider audience kind of first kicked off. Yeah, you're putting a lot of power in people's hands. Not everybody uses it well. In terms of what I'm looking forward to, I think I actually feel pretty satisfied with where it is right now. I mean, speaking absolutely personally, I probably don't need to be generating video and things like that. So yeah, I mean, that would be great. It'll be fun to look at. It'll be fun to play with, but it's probably not going to change my life. I guess I can't really think of something I'm like, I wish AI could do that. Maybe I do have a bit of a tendency, a slightly kind of, I don't know what the word is, Luddite is too strong, but just that kind of tendency to just, have that progress and enjoy it, but perhaps not necessarily need to take that progress to the next level straight away. I think I'm quite happy exploring what we've got, but maybe there's something I haven't thought of that's just around the corner. And I think there's some hugely exciting things. I mean, what it could do in healthcare, for example, which is probably certainly beyond my knowledge, but I think the potential there is crazy. And I was speaking to a friend the other day who's in the medical profession, and they were talking about, the ability of AI to make the correct diagnoses very, very quickly in a whole bunch of patients. And you just think, in a country like the UK, where we have got a big healthcare backlog and we've got all sorts of people on waiting lists, if that stuff can be used properly, it's game changing. So I think there are some great things to look forward to in that department. But in terms of me professionally and how I use it, I'm quite happy just taking it as it comes and going with the next best thing as it comes out and seeing if it's any good or if it's just hype, and seeing where it takes us.
There's always those use cases that we don't think of, right? Like I have a buddy who was talking to me about the Xbox Kinect the other day, and I was like, why are you talking about the Kinect? He's like, oh, like I'm in radar testing and radar this. And he's like, it's a huge tool. He's like, it's the best tool we have for some of this stuff. Like, the Xbox Kinect? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, it's a standard. Like, we have it in our documents where it'll be like, this is what the Kinect reading is. Now we'll use our radar. And I'm like, what? Like the thing that, gamers are like, I don't want that, is like the radar guys are like, man, that's pretty good. Like, so there's always something like the medical side of things, like you mentioned. Absolutely. There's going to be someone out there that's just like, we're on the cusp of like, enter in use case here. Like, please, we just need one more update.
Yeah. I'm sure there will be a lot of stuff like that. There will be.
The one thing I noticed, sorry to cut you off, but the one thing I noticed too is for prompt engineering as well. Like you were mentioning, sort of like people not necessarily using it fraudulently, but having like kind of bad code come out, things like that. I noticed that a little bit of it is like prompt engineering, where like I've asked it to give me an email form, and I was just messing around personally, so it doesn't really matter. But then I was like, hang on, is this a secure email form? And it's like, no, this is pretty insecure. And I'm like, wait, hold up. your first option, right? It just wants to please me, right? So it's just sort of like, here's an email form. It's the simplest one, but it is bad. But it didn't tell me that until I asked. And it's like, would you like to secure it? I was like, I would like to secure this. So there's a bit of that prompt engineering in there.
And that's the thing. If you don't know to ask that question, then you're never going to get the answer.
Yeah. That's why you need that human mentor shows up. It's like, why is all your stuff in HTTP and not HTTPS? What's going on here? Like, so we'll move on here, I think, to just talking more about sort of like specifically dev jobs. And, so the overhiring during COVID, the subsequent layoffs, and now, we've had the discussion on AI, and the rise of AI is really what some aspiring web developers they're finding like the job market just kind of hopeless. So what's your stance on the state of the industry? Does it still make sense if someone's listening to this right now and is thinking, I know it'll be like New Year's resolution season soon, and they might go, this is the year I'm going to learn to code, but I, have these problems like the layoffs and all that stuff. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, it has been a bit depressing. I've spoken to people, I know friends who have got kids who are kind of almost starting university age, wondering what to do. And people who are pretty keen on tech, and they're like, yeah, but AI is going to replace us. I think it's become a bit of a mantra. And as I said earlier, I don't really think it's true. And I do think the tech industry and coding jobs, are going to have great opportunities again. I think we've been through a very economically harsh period, and it's been a slightly strange one because it hasn't been like the 2008 crash where we had, significant unemployment and all sorts of very obvious doom and gloom. We actually had, I guess, more industry specific issues coming out of the pandemic. As you said, overhired in the pandemic, got rid of a bunch of people. But again, that was a lot of big companies and it made big headlines. But other companies, smaller companies were still growing and still are growing. And the jobs boards are far from empty, certainly in the UK. I think there are not as many opportunities as I would like to see yet. And I think, frustratingly, I thought it was going to improve much more through the second half of this year. I think it's improved probably only relatively slowly. I don't think we've yet seen the benefits of that trickle down to the actual hiring arm of the tech industry. I don't think we're actually seeing that manifest yet. But we will. Economies go up and down. And I suppose the question is, if this time next year, heading into maybe autumn 2025 or something, the economy is doing pretty well. People are expanding. Yeah, maybe not the FANG companies, but who cares? Maybe it's just other companies, great jobs, innovative products, small teams, etc. What if they're hiring and you actually didn't learn to code in 2025? You didn't do your New Year's resolution. Well, then you're playing catch up because then you're trying to, jump on a bus which is already moving. So, it's kind of like investing. You want to invest in a company when the share price is low, not when it's high. And maybe you need to be learning to code when the industry is not very good. So when it picks up, you're ready to jump in there and you're fresh and keen and you've got all of that knowledge. And it might only be 6 months away. We don't really know. Of course, it's a gamble and no one can be sure. But I think every pointer is that the tech sector is going to keep growing for a good time yet overall in the long term. And there are some great jobs to be had and great opportunities. And all the other things which are great about the tech sector, such as perhaps what you've done in terms of formal education not being as important as what you can show you're capable of. I think it is it's a great leveler like that. So I think there is reason to be optimistic. It is a bit depressing that this kind of hiring slump and this period of kind of low growth and high prices and high interest rates, etc., has kind of just dragged on so long, or it feels like it's dragged on so long. And hopefully we will come out of it. And hopefully we'll come out of it soon. I'm sure we will come out of it, and things will be on the up. But Yeah, no, I do think there's reason for optimism, and I think it is a very worthwhile pursuit. But I do always say to people who are sort of saying, I'm going to learn to code, fantastic. I really hope they're doing it because they've had a look at it and they just think it looks really fascinating and it looks really cool and it looks really creative, and not that they're looking at it and thinking, yay, I'm going to make a load of money. They may well make a load of money, but they're probably only going to make a load of money if they have a real love of it and if they're really into it. If they just see it as a bit of a day job and, yeah, maybe a route to a better life, like, I don't know, training in accountancy or something, then I guess in any kind of competitive market, they're not going to be the ones that get the jobs, unfortunately. So, yeah, horses for courses. But of course, you don't have to learn to code with the aim of getting a job. You know, it is also a hobby. It's also a side hustle. It's all sorts of things.
Do you think that like standing out from the crowd in that way, like more than just seeing it as a day job, is more important now than ever with all the situation that we've talked about, the economic situation and that?
I do think so. Yeah, I do think so. And it's something that we've thought about quite a lot at Scrimba. And a question we kind of get asked a lot from our community as well is like, how on earth do you get experience when you can't get a job? And then every job wants experience, the age old kind of catch 22. And yeah, so I think finding ways to stand out are really important. We've talked about learning in public, getting your blog going, getting your YouTube channel going, things like that. But of course, there's other options. There's networking, there's conferences, there's just even cold calling companies and finding problems with their website and offering to fix them and making connections and just utilizing every possibility you've got. You know, I interviewed somebody once who had got a job from somebody they got talking to at the queue at parents' evening at their kids' school. It's just, you know, things happen in random ways. But yeah, I think there are techniques whereby you can just get experience without getting a job. You know, you have got freelance options, and you can probably find somebody that needs something doing in your immediate circle. I bet a friend of a friend or a friend of a family member or a family member needs something doing. You know, my first paid gig in web dev was through a friend of my mum's. It's not so rock and roll, but it's true. And it gets the ball rolling. And, you know, if you can put on your job application that you've got this number of professional projects under your belt, well, suddenly you haven't got zero experience anymore. You haven't got the 10 years of React that they're asking for stupidly, but you have got some experience. And that does set you apart from some other candidates. And you know, there are other corners you can cut as well. I think, you know, learning to work like a professional developer is likely to work in terms of how they're using repos, how they're working with their colleagues. Well, you know, you can set that up yourself. You can do that with a group of people. You can produce a professional level piece of software together, even if it's only for practice. But still, you've then got that experience of teamwork and working with repos and all of the potential pitfalls that come with that, which you can talk about at interview and make it clear that you're not a complete beginner and they're not going to be having to train you from absolute zero on day one with this stuff. So yeah, I think there are options out there to get yourself noticed, and it's a really important thing to do, I think. And it probably will be, unless the tech sector goes massively into boom and they're just desperate for anybody to code. But I guess, yeah, that may be a few years away.
So like right now, like, you know, as of today, let's just say someone decides, okay, you know, they want to, you know, kind of take on the industry. They want to like learn coding, like you say. They are passionate about it, and so they're into it. So they learn to code, let's just say, and then beginning 2025, they're ready. Let's just hypothetically, you know, that person's ready, but they've never worked in an actual like professional tech job yet. How would you guide them on entering their first developer position? Is there anything specific that they would do? Like, you know, they bring the passion, they bring the skills, so they don't have to start at square one. They'll have a portfolio. We already mentioned like sort of maybe the social media stuff where either they're on a blog or they're posting like, hey, I built this, I built that, bit of a, you know, backing to their resume, let's say. Like, how would you guide them now where it's like, okay, now it's time to get hired. This is what you want to do.
So in terms of actually how to approach the application process.
Yeah. So like if they're ready and they're just sort of like, you know, they're looking at, I know you mentioned like the 10 years of React or, you know, the 15 years of Svelte, even though it's not that old, you know, things like that, where like they're going to get intimidated potentially, right? Like someone who's looking, they're gonna be like, what does this mean? Like, I didn't think it was out yet, and then they're kind of like scared. Like, how would you guide like a person like that into it? Like, would it be more using your positions? Like you mentioned, somebody was like kind of in a queue at school and then they got a job that way. Like, would it be more like that, like put yourself out there, or is it more like, hey, go to the job board, put your resume in?
I think probably it's going to be a hybrid approach, but I think there's a couple of things which are important. I think firstly is just to learn to recognize what is an advert for a job which is not a high level position. It is a junior level position. Regardless of what they call it, it's a junior level position. Then ignore their requirements. If you've got the basics of what they're after, but not the time limits or the time spent in that technology or whatever, just ignore all of that and have a go. I think the second thing is we used to really recommend taking a kind of a scattergun approach, a kind of, just keep clicking apply, go through LinkedIn or whatever and just click apply on all of these jobs, apply for 1,000 jobs. We've moved a little bit, actually. Our position now is a bit more like you might do better to find a handful of jobs that really suit you, really tailor make your application for each one, really try and network your way into that company, approach people on LinkedIn, see if you can speak to someone, see if you can set up a meeting, see if you can get on their radar in any way you can. Certainly in terms of any interaction you have with them, try and demonstrate that you've taken an interest in and are aware of the kind of problems they might be facing. That might be something quite simple. You might be sort of saying, well, I was quite taking a look at your SEO strategy and I was wondering like why you did it this way and why not that way. Why, I don't know, you've got some server-side rendering or you haven't got server-side rendering and maybe your site isn't being crawled by Google quite as efficiently as it could be or something like that. Things like that, just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of what they're doing. It's one of the oldest kind of interpersonal skills is take an interest in the other person. People like you more when you take an interest in them, by and large, unless they think you're getting too nosy. So, obviously it's got to be in balance, but I think things like that can go a long way. And I think that at the moment might be a better approach. But I do think there is a lot to be said for the personal networking skills. And I think somebody else we spoke to recently at Scrimba, because we have on our Discord server, people tell us, when they got hired. Hopefully they tell us when they got hired. Of course, not everybody does. And we get to hear their stories. And there was somebody not too long ago who did, I'm pretty sure it was totally pro bono. I think it was pure charity work for a charity, but the treasurer of that charity had a day job in the financial department of a company somewhere. They were looking to hire, and they got a foot in the door and then ended up getting the job. But I think other things to think about as well, of course, are transferable skills. I talked earlier, I thought I would end up in the English teaching industry as a coder, creating better online tutorials than were on offer at the time. All sorts of jobs can take you, or the skills from those jobs can take you in interesting coding directions. A lot of teams would probably be happy to have somebody on their team who knows how the product they're creating is going to be used. That is a real boon, and you can make that work for you if you have some knowledge like that. I think that's certainly worth getting into. And you have got other options, of course, to make yourself stand out as well. There is the whole freelance route. You could work 6 months or a year freelance and just really build up a portfolio of happy clients and see where that takes you. The other option you've got is to go it alone and set up your own SaaS. You could be the CEO of your own company. And, if the company folds, the company completely fails, but the product you created was actually really good and you've got something to show for it, that's still pretty cool. They're not going to be hiring you on your business acumen. They're hiring you on your coding ability. So that can take you places as well. So in a way, I think the short answer is throw the kitchen sink at it, but in a targeted way.
That's an interesting take too, because it would take a while to develop those skills to go on LinkedIn. And like you said, like, don't pour it on too much, right? Like, don't be nosy. And I feel like people are going to, like, as they learn to do that, especially if they're more introverted, as many developers are, they're going to be sort of like, maybe they'll go a little too far. Okay, I got to like draw that back. Like, I messaged that person too much or whatever. And they're going to like build that skill of like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go right for the CEO or something like that. Maybe I should go and try to find like the lead dev or the lead hand or, whatever it is, for whatever position. So I think that's an interesting take, because we do have a lot of insights into people's lives. It kind of sounds creepy, but like what they're posting online, I mean, like on LinkedIn, like they're, you're like, oh, okay, they worked here, they worked there, oh, they just left. Like, why did they leave? You can kind of look, and they're posting that publicly, like it's meant to be read. It's not like you're hacking in or something. And so like, there's definitely ways to target even sort of like strangers on a professional level like that, where it's like, oh, okay, this person has a bit of insight. I'll ping them, kind of thing. And that's something that, we didn't necessarily have. I was going to say 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago is when it kind of started, but like, it's absolutely something now where you can kind of direct that kitchen sink method, which I find really interesting. And it's a far cry as well from the COVID days, in the early COVID days, where everyone was just scooping up everybody. Because that was chaos, and it was just like, and I'm sure there's people listening to this now that are like, I got, they got scooped up during the COVID phase. And if they have any inkling of leaving, or if they have any inkling that they're going to be laid off, they're probably like, how do I move on? So I think that's good advice. Yeah,
those were crazy times. I guess we won't see them again.
I hope. I certainly hope.
Yeah.
So of course the holiday season is upon us. It is December, but approaching mid-December now. And so Scrimba is of course running its annual JavaScriptmas. So I just kind of thought, now that we're talking about people getting jobs, showing off their skills, learning new skills, kind of think it's like a great time to kind of mention JavaScriptmas. It's an annual event, and why don't you let us know what JavaScriptmas is?
Yeah, JavaScriptmas is kind of like an advent calendar of code. So basically, 1st of December to the 24th of December, we release at midnight a coding challenge each day. It's called JavaScriptmas, and they're mostly JavaScript-based challenges. Not all of them. There is HTML and CSS in there as well. There's a little bit of code breaking just for fun. There's a little bit of ethical hacking as well for fun, but they're mostly around JavaScript. But this year, we've kind of worked extra hard to make them fun. They've all got a bit of a Christmassy backstory to them. They're not just kind of like plain leak code style challenges, even though a lot of them are sort of algorithm challenges. And they're designed to, not take you too long. Most people don't want to or can't spend the entire day on something like that. And we've also tried to level the playing field by giving a challenge which is reasonably difficult, but giving a load of help. So, it's accessible even if you're relatively new. And basically, the deal is on the 24th of December, we will award prizes. Whether we'll actually get to announce it right on the 24th or if it will just be in the new year, I'm not 100% sure yet. But we're giving away. We've got MacBooks to give away. We have got loads of swag to give away from Scrimba and from MDN, because we've buddied up with MDN for JavaScriptmas this year. They've given us some swag as well to give away. We're also giving away lifetime Scrimba Pro membership. That's worth it depends where you are in the world, because we use pricing parity, but to give a kind of a US dollar example is probably in the region of I think about $175 a year or something along those lines. So it's quite decent to have that resource there for the rest of your life. Basically you complete the challenge, you submit it, and then you also have the option, and it is an option, to submit it on social media. Each time you submit it, you're basically buying yourself a lottery ticket to win the prizes. It's just going to be a random draw. So if you submit it to Scrimba and you submit it on social media, we will pick it up from the hashtag. That's got you 2 entries from one challenge. So if you do all of the challenges, 24 days, there's 48 potential chances to win the MacBook and the swag and the free Scrimba Pro. Come and check it out, basically. It's fun.
So how would you recommend that they get involved? Obviously, they're doing the challenges, of course. Do they have to, have a Scrimba subscription or anything like that? Like how can the community get involved?
You don't technically need a Scrimba subscription if you just want to do the challenges. However, obviously, you do want to be in a chance of winning the prize. So we do obviously need to know who submitted what. But that's just to sign up, and sign up is free. And there's no credit card. That's literally a free sign up. You can just have an account with us. And if you fancy going pro later, that's absolutely great. But if you just want to come with us and see what we offer for free, that is absolutely fine. So yeah, you can basically, you do the challenges, submit them. Also on our Discord server, we've got a great community going. So that's a really great place to network. It's a great place to help each other out, just get chatting to people who are solving the same challenge as you. And we use our Discord server for our community through all of our courses and our main career path. So there's loads going on there. It's always a pretty lively place. But, also you can use JavaScriptmas as part of, perhaps you're doing something like 100 days of code. That can be, one of your, one challenge is one of your days, for example. So other ways you can use it just to network and meet up with other people. And each challenge comes with a stretch goal as well. And so, yeah, perhaps something you can brag about on your LinkedIn or wherever you like to share stuff and show off what you've done. So, yeah, there's plenty you can do around it as well. Beneficial stuff, not just the learning. Yeah, share it. Maybe blog about how you solved one of the challenges, or create a YouTube video of you solving it, or live stream you solving it. All of that stuff. All available to you. And quite a lot of people are doing it, actually. I think our entries this year have been quite high. I think higher than last year.
Excellent. It sounds like a great way for anyone who is thinking of having that New Year's resolution to get a kickstart on it. Because it ends just before Christmas. And it's just sort of like, instead of you sitting around being like, next year, I'll start it. Maybe this is the year. And you can jump in, try some challenges, give it a go. And even if you don't enter, because you're really new, like you're really green, you at the very least can kind of look and be like, one day I'm going to solve this this challenge one day.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to start somewhere. And yeah, you might find that, and you will also find potentially, at Scrimba, we have got free courses which start absolutely from zero knowledge of web dev, like literally your first line of HTML. So, and that early date stuff is free. So yeah, people can check that out if they find JavaScriptmas, because it is, it's aimed at people who have got a little bit of JavaScript under their belt at least. So yeah, if you're a complete beginner, it's going to be hard, but why not check it out? As you say, it's a bit of motivation, and got to challenge yourself. I mean, I guess most of us did that in some way at the early days, right? We had coding challenges to solve, and we scratched our heads until we got there, and we couldn't ask ChatGPT in those days either.
No, unfortunately. I still remember the days where people were arguing whether or not Flexbox was going to stick around. So I was like, do I learn this? Do I learn this thing? It's like, yes, you do learn that thing. Well, Tom, thank you very much for being on the episode. Happy to hear about JavaScriptmas and all the other insights you've offered. But right now, I'd like to offer you the floor to discuss whatever you want, plug whatever you want, any links. I know you added some to the show notes, which I will be putting on the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. But if anything else you want to discuss, please take the floor. The floor is yours.
Hey, cool. Yeah. So yeah, I did put a couple of links on the show notes. So I linked to JavaScriptmas. I also linked to the LangChain course, which I mentioned earlier. So if you're interested in AI and you've never checked out a sort of a fairly bare bones AI framework, which just kind of links LLM processes together if you're doing something more complex, such as retrieval augmented generation or numerous other things. So we've got that course at Scrimba. That's a free course as well. Quite a lot of what we've got at Scrimba is free. There are also pro courses. If you're going the whole hog, if you fancy becoming a web developer, we've got the career path, and that takes you from zero knowledge to hireable level. So that's taking you from literally knowing nothing about HTML to being able to develop some really pretty complex stuff in React. It's, I think 80 odd hours now. As I say, the beginning parts of it are available for free, so you can check it out for fun. Also, I plug one of my own courses. I recently finished an advanced JavaScript course, and that was really fun. So looked at loads of stuff in there, took it from kind of late intermediate level, really, but then built up to some of the weirder stuff in JavaScript that people don't get to use perhaps that much, or perhaps not as much as they should. So things like generators, map, and set. looking at recursion, looking at currying, throttling, debouncing, things like that. Topics which perhaps don't get enough of an outing, but are pretty useful, if you are going to really kind of push yourself with your knowledge of JavaScript, or perhaps take your JavaScript away from just basic front end. Perhaps you're looking to back end or other uses of JavaScript in, I don't know, Internet of Things and all sorts. So, yeah, something to check out there. But that, I have to say, is a pro course.
Okay.
But everything else I've talked about is free, or you can at least try some of it for free. So, yeah, come and say hi on our Discord server. As I say, there's loads of people there, loads of developers. Really friendly place. We keep it well moderated. There's no hating on our Discord. There's no crypto scamming, or there is, but it only lasts about 10 seconds before we delete it. So yeah, it's a great place to hang out, even if you've had bad experiences with Discord before. And every Tuesday we have the Scrimba Town Hall, where we just get together and chat. And yeah, it's very laid back. It's just sort of question and answer, maybe interview somebody, something like that. So whoever fancies turning up for that and listening in and joining in is always welcome.
Excellent. I will add those links to your advanced JavaScript course, as well as to the Scrimba Discord as well. I'll add those to the show notes. So you, the listener, if anyone wants to tune into those, those will be on htmlallthethings.com. And Tom, a final farewell. Thank you very much for being on the show. It was a really insightful episode, and I'm glad I got to talk about AI and JavaScript and a whole bunch of other stuff, education, with you today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really great to be here. And yeah, really great to meet you, and I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Tom as much as we did, but it is unfortunately time to end. But remember, you can get up to 10% off using our link, scrimba.com/link/HTML, all the things, valid for new accounts only and through the end of 2024. And also remember to check out JavaScriptmas. It ends on December 24th, 2024. So that is coming up. If you want to engage in some challenges, maybe earn some swag and other prizes, as Tom mentioned in the episode, go and check that out. Again, link on htmlallthethings.com in the show notes for this episode. And of course, if you want to support episodes like this, you can do so by visiting us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/html all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons: Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com, Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com, Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com, Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se, Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server, and Stacy Mosteler from swoonworthydesigns.com. And we'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. And he actually set us up. He actually got me in contact with Tom, so I thank him for that as well, because this episode wouldn't have happened without him in that regard. And that's it. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you're listening to this on. And we are signing off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.